A lot of bright faces. Very good. So the discourse tonight is Sutta number 121. The Cūḻasuññata Sutta. The shorter discourse on voidness. An awful lot of Buddhists have a belief of voidness that means nothing at all. There is nothing. And that is not the definition that the Buddha gives. And this sutta shows you what he's talking about. Thus have I heard on one occasion the Blessed One was living in Savatthi and is that okay? Are you comfy? The Blessed One was living at Savatthi in the eastern park in the palace of Megara's mother. Then, when it was evening, the Venerable Ānanda rose from meditation and went to the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, sat down at one side and said to the Blessed One, Venerable Sir, on one occasion the Blessed One was living in the Sakyan country, where there was a town of the Sakyans named Nagaraga. There, Venerable Sir, I heard and learned this from the Blessed One's own lips. Now, Ānanda, I often abide in voidness. Did I hear that correctly, Venerable Sir? Did I learn that correctly, attend to that correctly, remember it correctly? Certainly, Ānanda, you heard that correctly, learned that correctly, and attended to that correctly. As formerly, Ānanda, so now, too, I often abide in voidness. Ānanda, just as this palace of Megara's mother is void of elephants, cattle, horses, and mares, void of gold and silver, void of the assembly of men and women, there is present only this non-voidness, namely the singleness dependent on the Sangha of monks. Now, Megara's mother, her name actually was Visakha, and she was a very, very wealthy woman. And she was the chief supporter of the Sangha. She was Anathan Pandika was the male supporter and she was the female supporter. She took care of whatever Sangha members needed, food or robes or medicine or a place to stay. Now the way this palace came into being was when Visakha got married. She was from a very, very wealthy family, and she married into a very, very wealthy family. And she had a cape that was made of all kinds of gems and gold and silver, and it was all woven together, and it was very, very expensive. And she wore that one day when she went out, and she decided that she wanted to come and visit with the Buddha. But she was wearing this very expensive cape. And she thought that it was not right to go visit the Buddha while she was wearing that, so she took it off and she gave it to her attendant and told her to take care of it. And then she went to see the Buddha, and the attendant put the cape someplace, and she went to listen to the Buddha. And they became so happy listening to whatever the Buddha was telling them at that time, and the attendant forgot the cape, and they went back to their house. And Visakha asked the attendant, what happened to the cape? And she said, oh, I forgot it. I put it in a special place and I just forgot to pick it up. Visakha said, well, we have to go get it. So I want you to go back and get it. But if that cape has been touched by the Venerable Ānanda, I want you to leave it there. And Ānanda was very good about walking around the monastery, finding things that were out of place and putting them in place and taking care of things. And he saw this cape and he moved it so it would be in a safe place whenever they came to get it. And the attendant said, or went and asked where the cape was, because it wasn't where she left it. And she asked Ānanda if he had moved it, and he said yes. So he left the cape. She left the cape there, and went back to Visakha and told her. And she said, this is a good way to make merit. What I want to do is I want to sell this cape, and whatever money there is from the sale of this cape, then I want to build a palace for monks so they have a place to stay. As it happens, nobody in the whole area had enough money to buy it. And she thought, well, nobody can afford to buy it, so I'm going to buy it myself and use that money to make this palace. Now, this palace was really quite something. There was a lot of rooms in it, but it didn't have a lot of the decorations. It didn't have pictures on the walls and that sort of thing, because that wasn't right to be in a monastery. And she built this palace, and it had rugs, throw rugs and things like this on it. It was very nice for the monks to be able to stay in. The way she became Megara's mother was that Megara was her father-in-law. And he was very much influenced by Brahmanism. And she talked with him and convinced him that the Buddha's path was better. And he started calling her his mother because she turned him on to the Buddha's teaching, and they invited the Buddha there and the monks for whatever, for some kind of meal or such. Anyway, yeah.
Are there any of these monasteries still around?
The foundation of some of them is still around. Like every time you hear me give a discourse, quite often you'll hear me talk about the Buddha was at Anathapindika's park and Jeta's grove. The Buddha stayed in what was called the perfume chamber. It was not an overly big place, but it was a place for him to kind of disappear and do his own practice and that sort of thing. He stayed in that place for 20 years. and he was also going out and traveling, so it wasn't a continuous 20 years. But the foundation of that place is still around. And one of my dreams is to go to Savatthi and do a retreat sitting on the foundation of the perfume chamber.
I have stood on that perfume chamber. The Garuda, what's the Pali name? Starts with a G. But in any case, it's smaller than the rug.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just a little guy.
Maybe one of these days I'll get to go. We'll see. So when they're talking about the palace of Megara's mother being void of elephants and cattle and horses, they didn't let any of those animals near because they didn't want the waste of those animals drawing flies, and that would interfere with the meditations that the monks were doing that stayed at that place. And they didn't doll it up like they would normally with gold and silver and gems and all of this kind of stuff. It was rather plain. So, the only thing that was in the palace was monks. So this is why it's saying Megara's mother is void of elephants, cattle, horses, and mares, void of gold and silver, void of the assembly of men and women. They didn't let laymen in. That was for monks only. There is present only this non-voidness, namely the singleness dependent on the Sangha of monks. So too, a monk not attending to the perception of village, not attending to the perception of people, attends to the singleness dependent on the perception of a forest. His mind enters into that perception of forest and acquires confidence, steadiness, and resolution. And a lot of times monks would go into the forest for meditation, and sometimes they would live in the forest depending on conditions. He understands whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the perception of a village. Those are not present in the forest. Whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the perception of people, those are not present there. There is present only this amount of disturbance, namely the singleness dependent on the perception of forest. There's still some sounds in the forest and that sort of thing. He understands this field of perception is void of the perception of a village, so it doesn't come into his mind. This field of perception is void of the perception of people because they go off by themselves into the forest. There's present only this non-voidness, namely the singleness dependent on the perception of the forest. Thus he regards it as void of what is not there, but as to what remains there, he understands that which is present. Thus, this is present. Thus, Ānanda, this is his genuine, undistorted, pure descent into voidness. So voidness doesn't mean nothing. Voidness means that there are distractions, but there are certain other things that are still there, like being in the forest where there's no people and there's no village, so he's not going to think about them. but he is going to notice what's in the forest. Again, Ānanda, a monk not attending to the perception of people, not attending to the perception of forest, attends to the singleness dependent on the perception of earth. Now, this is where some of the ideas from the Visuddhimagga are interjected, because they say, well, when it starts talking about meditation, the first thing they talk about is Sina Meditation. A kasina is a circle that's about a foot across, and it has cloth on it, and then they take mud and they put on it, and they get it real smooth, and then let it dry, and then they hold it up in front of them. They can and use that as their object of meditation. Now, the reason that I say this is from the Visuddhimagga is because the kind of meditation you use with that kind of kasina is one-pointed concentration. They say that the kasina can be either the earth, or it can be water, or it can be fire, or it can be air, or it can be colors. You take a piece of cloth and put over a circle like that, and then you start staring at that and close your eyes until you can see it in your mind's eye, and then you use that as your object of meditation. I did that for, it was 6 weeks or 2 months, I don't remember anymore. And I did that every day, and it was quite interesting. And you can develop very deep concentration by holding that, and then you get a kasina, the nimitta arising. Yeah. And then you take the nimitta as your object of meditation, and you can do all kinds of interesting things with the nimitta. You can make it big, you can make it small, you can make it bounce around, you can do all kinds of other things with it. But that's your object of meditation until your mind gets into one-pointed concentration, and you can get into absorption, and it doesn't take very long to do that. It does, that kind of meditation does not lead to nibbana. After a couple of months of being fairly skilled at being able to do that, I decided that that wasn't the kind of meditation I wanted to do. Now, what I did was I took the cover for a bowl, and I put white cloth on it, and I made it real tight, and took string and tied it on, put it on the wall. And I would sit down and I would stare at that. And it was kind of interesting. At first, I would just look at that and close my eyes, and I could kind of see it. And then after a while, it got much clearer, and I could see that. And one day I had my eyes open, and I was looking at the kasina, and there was an ant walking across the kasina. And I closed my eyes, and I saw the kasina in my mind with an ant walking across it. It's kind of fun. But kasinas are mentioned sometimes in the suttas, and I have not run across one person who can tell me how to do that without it being an absorption concentration. It does describe it in the Visuddhimagga, but the Visuddhimagga is not the commentary to use for something like that. Anyway, they're talking about the earth kasina, and with the earth kasina, what you do is you put the mud on it, and it's all nice and flat, and it's dry earth, and then you stare at that, and you start saying, "Earth, earth, 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 and then you close your eyes and try to bring the idea of the earth into your mind. So this is, I don't know how to tell anybody honestly how to do that without developing one-pointed concentration. Your mind gets real one-pointed. There's no getting around that. But you don't learn much from it. His mind enters into the perception of earth and acquires confidence, steadiness, and resolution, just as a bull's hide becomes free from folds when fully stretched with 100 pegs. So too a monk not attending to any of the ridges and hollows of the earth, to the rivers and ravines, the tracks of stumps and thorns and mountains and uneven places, attends to the singleness dependent on the perception of earth. His mind enters into the perception of earth and acquires confidence, steadiness, and resolution. He understands thus: whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the perception of people, those are not present here. Whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the perception of forest, those are not present here. There is present only this amount of disturbance, namely the singleness dependent on the perception of earth. Now, when you practice the kasina of earth, according to the Visuddhimagga, you can get at least to the fourth jhana. And again, I don't quite know how to describe that. I didn't do it long enough. I started realizing that it was one-pointed concentration, and I didn't want to develop that. It seems like I've already done that before. And that wasn't the way. He understands the field is of this field of perception is void of the perception of people. This field of perception is void of the perception of forest. There is present only this non-voidness, namely the singleness dependent on the perception of earth. Thus he regards it as void of what is not there, but as to what remains he understands that which is present. Thus, this is present. Thus, Ānanda, this too is his genuine, undistorted, pure descent into voidness. Again, Ānanda, a monk not attending to the perception of forest, not attending to the perception of earth, attends to the singleness dependent on the perception of the base of infinite space. So you carry this to the fourth jhana, and then your meditation changes and you start to feel the expansion in your mind in all directions with no center point. And that is the perception of infinite space. Now, you've been practicing the Brahma Viharas. In the Brahma Viharas, metta will take you to the fourth jhana. Then the feeling of metta changes to a feeling of compassion, and you feel this expansion in all directions at the same time with compassion. Now, one of the things that happens in especially Mahayana Buddhism is that they make a big deal of compassion, and they call it developing infinite compassion. And that is a misunderstanding. What it is compassion with infinite space. And the Buddha used to sit with that every morning for an hour or two and have his compassion with infinite space, and he was radiating that compassion to all beings. His mind enters into the perception of the base of infinite space, acquires confidence, steadiness, and resolution. He understands thus whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the perception of forest, those are not present here. Whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the perception of earth, those are not present here. There is present only this amount of disturbance, namely the singleness dependent on the perception of the base of infinite space. He understands this field of perception is void of the perception of forest. This field of perception is void of the perception of earth. Here is present only this non-voidness, namely the singleness dependent on the perception of the base of infinite space. Now, the singleness dependent on the perception of infinite space is not quite what you're experiencing. It's not single because you have the feeling of compassion with infinite space. So it's a little bit different with the Brahma Viharas. Thus he regards it as void of what is not there, but as to what remains he understands that which is present thus. This is present. Thus, Ānanda, this too is his genuine, undistorted, pure descent into voidness. So that the definition of voidness starts changing a little bit, depending on your object of meditation. Again, Ānanda, a monk not attending to the perception of earth, not attending to the perception of the base of infinite space, attends to the singleness dependent on the perception of the base of infinite consciousness. He enters into that perception of the base of infinite consciousness and acquires confidence, steadiness, and resolution. He understands thus whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the perception of earth, those are not present here. Whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the perception of the base of infinite space, those are not present here. There's present only this amount of disturbance. And again, there's two things, not the single thing. When you get into, or you go beyond the base of infinite space, the feeling of loving kindness changes into a feeling of joy. And then you're able to see individual consciousnesses arise and pass away very quickly. Some people have trouble recognizing that, but when you start developing mastery, you'll see it very easily. And I can teach you mastery of the jhanas, but it takes more than 10 days to do it, depending on the person's abilities to. Sometimes it can go fast, but generally it takes a couple of weeks. It takes like 14 days to get mastery in each one of the jhanas. The way that I teach mastery is after you've gotten to a certain degree of the meditation and you want to gain mastery, what you do is you make a determination before you sit that for this meditation I'm going to go no higher than the first jhana. And then you make a determination that you're going to go in and out of the jhana, of the first jhana, in 15 minutes. It's not the same every time. One time it's 14 minutes and 56 seconds. One time it's 15 minutes and 3 seconds. And you keep on changing the time until you're able to hit it exactly every time. Whatever your determination is, then you practice hitting that exact time that you put your attention on it. And that means going into the first jhana, sitting in the first jhana, coming out to the second. When you're able to do that, then I will tell you, you make a determination to go no higher than the first jhana for that sitting. Every time you have to make that kind of determination. And now you'll sit for 30 minutes. And again, it's not always 30 minutes exactly. You change it around so that there's a little differences. And when you can hit that every time, then I will tell you to go no higher than the first jhana for this sitting and sit for 1 hour. See, this is why it takes a little bit longer to do this. And that means you go into the first jhana, you're there, you come out at exactly 1 hour, 5 seconds, 3 seconds, whatever it happens to be. When you do that, then you make a strong determination to go in and out of the jhana in 6 seconds or 5 seconds. And when you can do that every time, then I will tell you to go to the second jhana. Make a determination that you're only going to go to the second jhana, and you do that for 15 minutes, and then 30 minutes, and then 1 hour, and then a few seconds. So it takes some time to be able to develop your internal clock. Now, I suggested at the start of the retreat that you would make a determination of waking up and try to hit it exactly what time you're going to wake up, and change the numbers occasionally. 4:59, 5:01, like that. The reason I told you to do that is so that you get used to your body clock, being able to hit it. So when you start working with mastery, then you're fine-tuning your body clock so you can go in and out more quickly at a determined time. So after you do the second jhana, then you make a determination not to go higher than the third jhana. And you go in and out in 15 minutes, you go in and out at 30 minutes, you go in and out at an hour, and then a few seconds, in and out. So you're really gaining not only a lot of confidence in your ability to go in and out of the jhana, you're also fine-tuning your internal clock. So you don't need to use a clock eventually. And then you do that to the fourth jhana, and then you do that with infinite space and infinite consciousness and nothingness, and neither perception nor non-perception. When you're able to do that and go all the way through the jhanas, then you can be walking down the street and decide that you want to be in a jhana. And all you do is make a determination, and you can be in that jhana. It's a real useful tool, especially when people want to take pictures of you. Yeah.
Yeah,
I might have misunderstood you, but did you say when you go, like you were describing the first jhana, then you come out, you said you come out in the second jhana?
No.
Okay.
You come out in the first jhana.
Okay, you just come back. There's not a jhana that you're coming out into, and I misunderstood you. Okay.
Well, you come out and you're out of the jhana.
Right.
Okay? And when you can hit it exactly to the second, with each one of those, you have developed your body clock to a very fine degree. And some people are so skilled that when they're talking, in between the words, they can go in and out of a jhana. You want some power in a talk? It takes practice. It's not an easy thing. But it is very useful because you can be going to a hospital and seeing somebody that's suffering a lot. You can go in and out of a jhana of joy or equanimity, whatever it happens you choose to go in and out of, and you're starting to radiate that kind of feeling in the room, and that helps the person that's sick. Then you make a determination that you're going to go in the first jhana for 4 seconds, and then you come out and make a determination you're going to go in nothingness for a period of time, and then you start popping around, so you don't just do it in order. So you can have the ability to get into any one of these jhanas in and out with your determination. Mind is going to do this for this period of time. Sometimes it can be for a long time if you want to sit, and you can expand it to more than 1 hour. I mean, just practice going in and out. The Venerable Sariputta was very, very skilled at doing that. And sometimes he would make a determination that today I'm only going to sit in the 4th jhana, or I'm only going to sit in the 1st jhana. Whatever it happens to be, so he could see and understand the 1st jhana completely. And Ānanda would see him coming out, and he'd see him walking around, and he would go up to Sariputta and he would say, "Venerable Sir, what jhana were you sitting in today? Your features are very bright, they're very clear. What were you doing in your meditation today?" And he would say, "Well, I was in the 1st jhana all day." And then he would do that with the other jhanas. So you can carry this kind of mastery to a very, very fine degree. It does take time because you need an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours to be able to do it, so you can hit it right on and extend that to whenever you need it.
And become also for not so developed, really in which jhana I am now, and how much I-ness is in it, and it's very dangerous.
Actually, it's not. No.
Well, dangerous, I meant for the participation of me, of my...
Well, no, there are no hindrances when you're in that when you're in that jhana, so that means there's no craving. Generally speaking, I won't teach somebody unless they have some kind of attainment. So, get to work, guys. Then we'll start having fun. Sometimes I do teach it, but not very often. Okay. Okay, there is present only this amount of disturbance, namely the singleness dependent on the perception of the base of infinite consciousness. Now the thing with infinite consciousness is when you get into this and you could sit with it for a while and you really become familiar with it, it is teaching you some very big insights. Because you're seeing consciousness arise and pass away, arise and pass away. With ordinary mind, you think that when you see something, it's a continuous sight. And now when you get in infinite consciousness, you're seeing it arise and pass away very quickly. And it's the same with all of the sense doors, including mind. And you're seeing that everything really, really is impermanent. And you're also seeing that there is an unsatisfactory nature in being able to see this because there is disturbance there. And that's a form of suffering. And you're seeing the impersonal nature of each of these consciousnesses arise and pass away, arise and pass away. There's no controller. It's just there. So now you're seeing up close and personal anicca, dukkha, and anatta. And that's not as fine as it goes for seeing those, because you will see impermanence, suffering, and not self in every link of dependent origination. So you're seeing arising, passing away, rising, passing away very, very quickly at this stage. But when you get into neither perception nor non-perception, you're starting to see individual consciousnesses and 1/12 of each individual consciousness. You can see that. That's why I've been talking about, you get into this exquisite, peaceful, calm, bright mind, very alert, and you'll start to see little vibrations. And I'm telling you, you need to 6R those. What are you seeing? The individual links. So you're seeing impermanence, suffering, and the impersonal nature of every link. It's a little bit different than just seeing impermanence. This is fine-tuning it so that it's very, very subtle states that you're able actually to see for yourself. Anyway, he understands this field of perception as void of the field or the perception of earth. This field of perception is void of the perception of the base of infinite space. There is present only this non-voidness, namely the singleness dependent on the perception of the base of infinite consciousness. Thus he regards it as void of what is not there, but as to what remains he understands that which is present. Thus, this is present. Thus, Ānanda, this too is his genuine, undistorted, pure descent into voidness. Again, Ānanda, a monk not attending to the perception of the base of infinite space, not attending to the perception of the base of infinite consciousness, attends to the singleness dependent on the perception of the base of nothingness. His mind enters into that perception of the base of nothingness and acquires confidence, steadiness, and resolution. He understands thus whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the perception of the base of infinite space, those are not present here. Whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the perception of the base of infinite consciousness, those are not present here. There is present only this amount of disturbance, namely the singleness dependent on the perception of the base of nothingness. Now, when you get deeper in your meditation and the infinite consciousness fades away, you get into a space that's called nothingness. This is where mind is not looking outside of itself anymore. And actually, this is one of the more interesting states of meditation to be in. It's really nice. And there's nothing there. But this is where you learn to fine-tune your energy. Now, I tell you that this is where equanimity is your object of meditation. And to use that as your object of meditation. And if you put too much attention into trying to see your object of meditation more clearly, then your mind will start to get restless. Now, the kind of restlessness that arises is an unpleasant feeling. It's not a pleasant feeling. It has some static in it. And your mind is used to being very peaceful and calm with nothing there, but all of a sudden, because you're using too much energy and effort to see more clearly, then you have more disturbance in your mind. And that will turn into wandering thoughts and other kinds of distraction that will pull your attention away from the equanimity itself. So you have to back off a little bit. Just a little tiny bit. And it doesn't happen right away that your mind is going to become calm again. Sometimes it happens quick, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it might take 15 or 20 seconds or 30 seconds before your mind becomes calm again after you've made that adjustment. Now, if you start backing away too much and you relax a little too much, then the other problem arises. And this is torpor. It's not sloth anymore. It's just torpor. Torpor means dullness. Your mind dulls out. You don't see as clearly as you need to. So then you have to put a little tiny bit more attention in observing the equanimity. So now you're learning how to fine-tune. And this is one of the great fun lessons that you learn when you're in the realm of nothingness. How to fine-tune, how to adjust so that everything is in balance. And there are other things that happen in the realm of nothingness. For some people, I'm saying, your mind is on your object of meditation, and the mind's attention starts moving a little bit and wobbling. And if you 6R right then, your mind will settle down and just be on your object of meditation without any problem. But there's something that happens before mind's attention starts moving a little bit. And I want you to tell me what that is. So what I'm really saying when I ask what happens right before that is, how sharp is your mindfulness at that time? Are you able to see something else arising before your mind's attention starts moving? And when you see that, then I ask you another question. What happens before that? This is subtle stuff. To be quite honest, not that many people really notice the thing before that. I'll let you work for a little while and then I'll tell you. That shows you that I'm compassionate. Okay, he understands this field of perception as void of the perception of the base of infinite space. This field of perception is void of the perception of the base of infinite consciousness. There is only present this non-voidness, namely this singleness dependent on the perception of the base of nothingness. Thus he regards it as void of what is not there, but as to what remains, he understands there is present thus. This is present. Thus, Ānanda, this too is his genuine, undistorted, pure descent into voidness. Again, Ānanda, a monk not attending to the perception of the base of infinite consciousness, not attending to the base of perception of the base of nothingness, attends to the singleness dependent on the perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception. His mind enters into that perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception and acquires confidence, steadiness, and resolution. He understands thus whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the perception of the base of infinite consciousness. Those are not present here. Whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the perception of the base of nothingness. Those are not present here. There is present only this amount of disturbance, namely the singleness dependent on the perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception. He understands this field of perception is void of the perception of the base of infinite consciousness. This field of perception is void of the perception of the base of nothingness. There's only present this amount of non-voidness, namely the singleness, dependent on the perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception. Thus he regards it as void of what is not there, but as to what remains there he understands there that which is present thus. This is present. In other words, even that fine state of neither perception nor non-perception, where your mind is exceptionally bright and clear and still, your awareness still sees that, and that causes some disturbance. Okay? Even this, where you can sit for a half an hour and a half without having anything arise in your mind's attention at all. Oh, that's boring. There's nothing there. Who's bored? Who wants some excitement? 6 are those kind of thoughts. 6 are those kind of feelings. Thus, Ānanda, this too is his genuine, undistorted, pure descent into voidness. Again, Ānanda, a monk not attending to the perception of the base of nothingness, not attending to the perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception, attends to the singleness, dependent on the signless collectedness of mind. His mind enters into that signless collectedness of mind and acquires confidence, steadiness, and resolution. He understands whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the perception of the base of nothingness, those are not present here. Whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception, those are not present here. There is present only this amount of disturbance, namely that connected with the 6 bases that are dependent on this body and conditioned by life. In other words, the only disturbance that you have, you don't really see it as a disturbance because there is no perception, there is no feeling, there is no consciousness at that time. But there is still some disturbance because your body doesn't die when you're in that state, right? You still have the 6 sense doors. They are still there. And these are conditioned by life. So this is where it gets this gets real interesting, because when you come out of that state, you have a clean slate as far as consciousness is concerned. There's nothing there. And then you start seeing the links of dependent origination and how the conditioned states arise. And then you see how the conditioned states cease. And when there is the final letting go of formations, there are no more conditions. And when there's no more conditions, what do we call that? Nibbana. There's no fireworks. There's only this mind that is incredibly alert and bright, and a feeling of relief that's almost overwhelming at first. It's really nice, and you will feel happy. And I've had students come to me and they tell me of their experience like that. And I said, well, good. You've attained Nibbana. You've become a Sotapanna, or whatever. And they say something to the effect of, is that all there is? Is that all there is? Don't you feel that relief? Well, yeah, but it's peaceful and calm. Well, is that a bad thing? But there's no fireworks. I want explosions happening and all kinds of, I finally did it. But your mind is so alert and your mind is so bright. And the happiness just kind of permeates everything. It's a nice state to be in, and it lasts for some days. And that's one of the ways that you tell that you have had that attainment. It isn't just a flash in the pan kind of happiness that arises and then fades away. You will feel this 3 or 4 or 5, 6 days. And you'll still feel the relief later. You know that something major has happened. And this is the way that you attain Nibbana. It's not through just seeing impermanence or suffering or not self. It's from seeing all of the links of dependent origination. And it can happen really fast. You might not even notice it at first. You come in and you talk to me and you talk about the relief and being peaceful and calm, and I say, did you see any little blinking little things happen? Well, yeah. Well, you saw the links, whether you recognize it for sure or not. As you continue meditating, as you continue going deeper, everything starts to slow down a little bit more. And you'll be able to see, if it happens again and you become a Saktagami, you'll be able to see more clearly the arising and passing away of these things. But it still happens fast. But it happens for a longer period of time because it arises and passes away 2 times. So it's quite a few times that you're seeing this, and you can recognize those little blips a little bit more clearly. As you continue on with your meditation, your awareness becomes super, super sharp. And it's just like seeing the infinite consciousness, the arising and passing away. Well, now you're going to see these links arise and pass away, not quite as fast, and you'll be able to recognize them even more clearly. And they arise and pass away 3 times. And if you keep going, some people, they have the idea, yeah, I'd like to stop at anagami. I'll attain Nibbana next lifetime, not this lifetime. So they don't go as deep into meditation. But they are able now to sit in the cessation of perception and feeling by using their determination, and determine that they're going to do it for a length of time. Depending on how much time they have, they can do it for 2 days, 3 days, 5 days, up to 7 days. And then they make a determination to come out. They won't see the dependent origination arising and passing away, because they make the determination that they don't want to go any higher. But the advantage of being an anagami is nice, because you never have lust or hatred arise in your mind ever again. It just fades away. No more of those kind of hindrances. There's still some fetters that can arise. For instance, you can be an anagami and still have torpor, and you could be an anagami and still have restlessness. Yeah.
What's witnessing the links?
What's witnessing the links?
What
Now, you mind.
Consciousness.
Mind.
Could you elaborate?
It gets real tricky to try to explain this.
Why don't you just explain it the way you explain it?
You want to try?
He said, Ānanda came to him and asked the same question, and the Buddha said, the eye of wisdom. I said, what? The eye of wisdom.
The eye of wisdom.
The eye of wisdom.
Capital
E-Y-E.
An inner eye of wisdom, not third eye.
What is the eye of wisdom?
It's got this.
That is observation with no craving in it. In other words, it's the pure mind that observes. That is the eye of wisdom. And that's why you go to Nepal, and on the stupas they have this eye with a little curly Q above it. They have the I think it's the two eyes actually.
Yeah, they have two eyes.
Yeah, but I have seen some stupas that just had one eye, and that's depicting the eye of wisdom. Yes.
So metaphorically, that is sort of like the opening of the third eye. People might,
Well, it's deeper than that. I mean, that opening of the third eye that's kid stuff. And that leads to a lot of psychic things, and you might develop that as you see these links of dependent origination and have these abilities. But I'm not interested in teaching anybody to develop their psychic abilities. It's too much work. Well, I've had telephone calls of somebody that, can you teach me how to see with the third eye? Yes, I can. It'll take 10 years. And it means practice every day for 10 years to be able to develop it without the attachment to it. And it's too much work for me. Trying to pare down somebody's, hey, I'm hot stuff, I can do this. You don't show off ever.
You mentioned that some Ānandas decide they want to stay there. Is it because they want to be reborn in this realm? They don't want to.
No, they aren't reborn in this realm again. They're called a non-returner. They're reborn in a special. There's 5 or 6, I don't remember how many, Brahmalokas that last for a long period of time. And they will attain arahatship there, and then when the karma wears out, then they die and are not reborn in a conventional kind of sense. And I say that meaning they don't have any more craving. And craving is the thing that holds this idea together. Okay? And it's like a sandcastle. You can build a beautiful sandcastle and a wave comes along and knocks it down. Can you rebuild that sandcastle in exactly the same way with each grain of salt or sand in exactly the same place? That's what it is to attain nibbana and not come back. Okay? So, I spent 12 years looking for an arahat, and I never found one. There's not so many of them around, and I'm not sure I would actually be able to recognize an arahat because I'd have to spend an awful long time with them. I'd have to spend a year or 2 just hanging out with them to see what they do in every situation, to see if there's any slightest bit of pride coming up, or sloth and torpor, or restlessness, or desire to be reborn someplace else. It takes a long time to be able to recognize a true arahat. You can go up and ask an arahat if he is an arahat, and he might answer you, and he might tell you it doesn't matter one way or the other. And actually, every attainment is like that. It doesn't matter one way or the other to anybody else. It matters to you only. What good does my being an arahat do for you? Except if you ask a question, you know the answer is going to be absolutely perfect. So there is no pride in an arahat at all. There's no desire to be reborn in any other realm. There's no sloth and torpor. There's no restlessness. And there is no ignorance. Now, if you can find somebody to hang out that has those qualities, that's a good thing. Or you can keep doing the meditation and become an arahat, and then you can teach me. And what she tried to tell you yesterday was I used to, every morning when I was in one particular temple, I was with a very, very famous monk. He was called K. Sri Dhammananda. He's written 60 or 70 books, and he gave absolutely brilliant Dhamma talks. Really good. And I highly recommend any of his books and any of his talks. And we have 20 some talks of his. If you want to listen to, we can make copies and send them to you. Really, really good stuff. And his sense of humor was brilliant. So what I did was I would go down and I would eat breakfast, and at that time I was eating breakfast, and then I would go to his office, and he always had this tape that was going on in a continuous loop. Om Mani Padme Hum, and it was kind of singing. And one of the things that happened every time I went down to see him, and it happened every morning, is we would start giggling and laughing like little kids. Just saying something that's kind of ridiculous to make each one of us laugh. And it was great fun. And one day I walked into his office and he was playing Om Mani Padme Hum. And in my mind, I heard, "Oh, Mommy, take me home." And I told him about that, and he made sure it was playing every time he came in after that. And I'd just walk in and start laughing. It was great fun. He asked me to come to his temple. He was about 78 years old when that happened. And no, it was 76. When I came to his temple, he wanted to find out about meditation, but he didn't tell me that that's what he wanted. So every night I was teaching a meditation class at somewhere on the monastery grounds. And he would come outside the door and listen to what the Dhamma talks that I was giving, and then go back and start practicing on his own. And sometimes he would walk in, but just his presence made me very much more careful of the things I was saying. And there's a lot of pressure in being with somebody like that, because he was a very famous man, and I wanted to make sure that everything that I said was correctly. One time he asked me to come and give a talk, and then he was going to give a talk, and there was another big monk from another country, and they were all going to be giving talks, and I went first, and I was so intimidated that I only gave a talk for about 15 minutes, and then I quit. I couldn't do any more because they were there. They're the ones I wanted to listen to, not me. It was really kind of an interesting phenomena. Anyway, he did practice a meditation, and he was somewhat successful with his meditation. And when it got time for me to leave, I was going to be coming back to America. He kept on giving me things. Take this back with you, take this back with you. And I never could figure out quite what he was doing until the day before I left, somebody came in and said, "Oh yeah, he's been practicing the way you teach, and he wants to give you gifts for thanking me for helping him." That's amazing. Anyway, he understands this field of perception as void of the perception of the base of nothingness. This field of perception is void of the perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception. There is present only this non-voidness, namely that connected with the 6 sense bases that are dependent on this body and conditioned by life. Thus he regards it as void of what is not there, but as to what remains there, he understands that which is present thus. This is present. Thus, Ānanda, this too is his genuine, undistorted, pure descent into voidness. And again, Ānanda, a monk not attending to the perception of the base of nothingness, not attending to the perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception, attends to the singleness dependent on the signless collectedness of mind. That is the cessation of perception, feeling, and consciousness. He enters into that signless collectedness of mind and acquires confidence, steadiness, and resolution. This is just part of the formula, and for this particular part of this sutta, I would take that sentence out, because it's not like he has any kind of control when he's in that and gain confidence in that. It's just something that can arise, and he can make a determination to be in that, but there is no controller at all. He understands thus this signless collectedness of mind is conditioned here's a word that Bhikkhu Bodhi really likes to use, and it's not one that I prefer. He says, and volitionally produced. That means with his will. He produces it. And that's an iffy kind of translation. We will get another one. Just be patient. It will be easier to understand. But whatever is conditioned and volitionally produced is impermanent, subject to cessation. When he knows and sees thus, his mind is liberated from the taint of sensual desire, from the disturbance from sensual desire, from the disturbance of habitual tendency, from disturbance of ignorance. When it is liberated, there comes the knowledge it is liberated. He understands birth is destroyed. The holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more coming to any state of being. He understands thus whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the disturbance of sensual desire, those are not present here. Whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the disturbance of habitual tendency, those are not present here. Whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the disturbance of ignorance, those are not present here. There is present only this amount of disturbance, namely that connected with the 6 spaces that are dependent on his body and conditioned by life. He understands the field of perception is void of the disturbance of sensual desire. This field of perception is void of the disturbance of habitual tendency. This field of perception is void of the taint, or of the disturbance of ignorance. There is present only this non-voidness, namely that connected with the 6 bases that are dependent on this body and conditioned by life. Thus he regards it as void of what is not there, but as to what remains he understands that which is present. Thus, this is present. Thus, Ānanda, this too is his genuine, undistorted, pure descent into voidness, supreme and unsurpassed. Ānanda, whatever recluses and Brahmins in the past enter upon and abide in pure, supreme, unsurpassed voidness, all entered upon and abided in this same pure, supreme, unsurpassed voidness. Whatever recluses and Brahmins in the future will enter upon and abide in pure, supreme, unsurpassed voidness. All will enter upon and abide in this same pure, supreme, unsurpassed voidness. Whatever recluses and Brahmins in the present enter upon and abide in pure, supreme, unsurpassed voidness, all enter upon and abide in this same pure, supreme, unsurpassed voidness. Therefore, Ānanda, you should train thus. We will enter upon and abide in pure, supreme, unsurpassed voidness. That's what the Blessed One said. The Venerable Ānanda was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. So, when you're talking about voidness, it does not mean nothing is there. I mean, even after you attain Nibbana, or while you're attaining Nibbana, there's still something there. And that something is the 6 sense bases that keep the body alive. If someone decides that they become an arahat and they don't join the Sangha for purity, they will die within 7 days. They need to have the purity of the Sangha. They will live longer then. They live for many years. Then let's share some merit. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we've thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, Nagas of mighty powers, share this merit. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.